What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here, and patch 12.5 is here for League of Legends. I am 4 hours late, as I had stuff to do, unfortunately, this morning afternoon, but I am here and ready to go. So let's talk about it. 12.5, not the biggest patch overall, all around. Here's the highlights. There are scarcely a few things. We're going to go for under 30 minutes. Count it. I don't know how it's going to go. We're going for under 30. If I can help it, 21:28 is the time. Maybe before the TLDR, we'll see. First things first, Ahri is getting an update. A balance patch because she did come out a little bit strong. Not a very big hit, right? It's going to be pretty small. I'm going to say immediately to the tune of maybe about 1% actually. So the flat damage and Foxfire being down by a flat 10 is pretty meaningful. It does make it less of an obvious learn at rank 1, but you probably still do it because it pretty much guarantees last hits the first 3 melees for you, and that's a pretty big deal. But 5 mana cost there, 10 mana cost on Charm. I mean, this is a very, very cheap mana cost, so okay, give her some mana constraints, fair enough. And again, the 10 damage. So here is Ahri's W damage, just based on the first pellet, accounting for some sort of generic level of expected ability power purchases, AP purchases. So roughly here is what the damage is going to be on a pellet overall. So a 16% nerf in the early game, 4% nerf in the late game. Certainly not trivial. You know, some mana cost changes. Okay, great. Next up is a set of Gwen changes. They were hoping to get Gwen out of pro bound. They have still improved very heavily. Like I think they're getting to a closer and closer spot where Gwen is, playable in solo queue and not overpowering in pro. She is still one of the, I think, top 3 top laners right now, from my recollection. So okay, going to try to find some nerfs. One of the things they're doing is they are slightly lowering her Baron pressure. And this will do a very little bit to damage her jungle clear, but not as much as I saw people complain about on Reddit. The bigger one is, in fact, the bonus range on skip and slash. In general, the belief is that pros can utilize the attack range better than us normal human beings, and so it ends up being a pretty pro-skewed nerf. Obviously, this is all direct nerfs. Gwen has to lose win right here, but they're hoping they can get her out of pro and then find a way to buff her back up. I actually did some time investigating the ability power ratio on her passive, and it doesn't seem absurdly out of line. Normally, percent health ratios on, like, AP ratios on percent health ratios are... AP ratios on percent health damage tends to be often very, very meager. And in Gwen's case, after doing all the math, it's like a normal AP ratio. So Gwen doesn't seem to have absurdly high ratios. So I know I had a theory earlier that like Gwen might scale better with gold. She still does compared to other percent health damage champions, but her overall kit doesn't appear to scale so absurdly off of AP. That's sort of the anecdotal look. I spent a little bit of time on it, maybe 10-15 minutes, and that was my conclusion. So she's not really absurd on AP ratios, but again, still obviously does quite well in pro. So here is the math, by the way, on the monster cap, because it's the only thing that's actually worth mathing. So this is the flat damage cap on her passive before and after the changes, using a generic approximation for AP that she's going to have as a mage overall. And so the cap from goes 60 to 14, and the early game goes from 88 to 57. What does that mean for the actual math? It means this. It means that this is the max health that was countable through the passive, right? So if you're hitting an 1800 health red buff, it actually max health though had 1342. Now it's going to hit max health though it's 1141. So if you're looking at things like Big Raptor, Big Wolf, that's not going to be affected very much. And so that's basically how this works, right? Because the max damage against monsters is a number, which is this number. And then keep in mind the ability itself has a 1% max health plus some percent max health per AP, right? So the fact that, these kind of scale together says, okay, technically you can get bigger targets, but what this really means is you are, in fact, right, dealing this entire 1/3 less damage against things like Dragon and Baron and whatnot, because you were always capped at 88 against Dragon and Baron. Now you're always capped at 57 against Dragon and Baron. Now 57 on hit damage through a passive is still very, very good. It works on all your autos, works on the middle Q, works on every tick of the R. Like, this is still relevant. Again, this is monster damage only. That's where the cap is placed. But hey, by the way, yes, indeed, this really is kind of the difference. So just wanted to give you the numbers because it doesn't really destroy her first clear. It will matter some, right? She'll do 2 less damage per hit on red buff. That at some point can matter. But like, to say Jungle Gwen is dead because of this change is hard trolling. Her Baron Rush is quite a lot worse, the tune of 30 less damage per hit, but that's the thing. All right, next up we have Kennen getting some small changes. I think they're interesting buffs, right? Make the W more interesting part of the kit. I think W is maybe one of the more interesting abilities on Kennen. Outside of the ulti, obviously being like the big thing that stands out for him. So a bunch more flat damage. 20 to 60 becomes 35 to 75. The bonus AD ratio goes up by a flat 20%. And the AP ratio goes up by 10% here as well. Now, I'm going to assume it is AP Kennen. So here is the W damage, by the way, straight up. Right, goes from 20 to 35, and then with an approximation of our 25 to 35% ability power ratio, the actual spell damage goes up by this much. I want to point out that, this is the W passive. This is not the W active that he presses the button on. So this isn't like a terribly large portion of the kit. For example, here is Kennen's auto attack damage, like with a conventional AP build. Right, here is his average damage on hit. Keep in mind, Kennen's base AD is in fact not very high. But yeah, adding 1/5 of this, right, which is adding 5 damage, or in this case, adding 8 damage. His base AD is about 49, and then adding again 1/5 of this, so adding 36, 39. Yeah, his base AD is 110. So he's not even like a big auto attacker. Certainly for like a ranged auto attacker, 149 base damage on hit is quite high. But like you compare to Nico, you compare to Vayne, you compare to like any other champion, a Kaisa, right, who has an auto attack enhancer. This is still very low. Now it's 1/2 of his W. And the active is arguably more important, but like, hey, by the way, right, he's not an absurd auto attacker even with these changes. Obviously, the like spike of damage is still cool. If you are going to build a bunch of bonus AD, then hey, great, you're getting pretty decent returns. Like this is better returns. Like the bonus AD ratio at 120% is better than returns at 75. So like the W means more the more AD you buy. Just in general, that's going to be the math. Anyway, yeah, I don't think it's a huge change, honestly. I think it is actually pretty small. I found his ability to be meaningful, though. Like, you are playing around this. I think it dealing as much damage as the Sheen proc seems to make sense to me, And it's even then, it's not even quite there. Like, we're not even at Sheen levels of damage until you get a bunch of bonus AD and stuff. So, seems okay. I don't think it's a huge buff, though. Next up, it's a really cool set of changes. It is a Master Yi minor reshape. This one's actually going to be pretty meaningful. It's probably going to be several minutes in this one. So what it comes down to is Duskblade has been a bit too strong, especially in lower elo. I'm adding the second part. That's true. However, his crit builds are not nearly as absurd, or his crit builds are much more comparable in higher MMRs. So Master Yi, the perennial, low MMR stomper, has a build that's a low MMR stomp. So can they reshape Master Yi to make that build less strong? And indeed they can. So the summary of changes. The base damage on Q, keep in mind this is a total AD ratio, so his level 1 AD is part of the math, goes down. The total damage goes down. The AD ratio goes from 0.9 to 0.6, making flat AD buys less important. And though the base damage is up by 5 to minus 15, right? Plus 5 equal minus 5, minus 5, minus 15, right? So plus 5 early game, but lower AD ratio means less damage. Minus 15 and minus AD ratio means a lot less damage. And the subsequent hits reduced on the same target are still the same. So just a lot less damage baseline on Alpha Strike. Okay, so Alpha Strike's less valuable. What else can we do? Well, also, by the way, our bonus damage from crits are also going down. All right. I thought we were nerfing the crit build. Stay tuned. Or nerfing the lethality build, not the crit build. But here's the thing, though. Alpha Strike now applies on-hit effects, which includes the on-hit effect from his E Wuju style. That is definitely a very big deal. That means Kraken Slayer, right, is now going to apply with Alpha Strike. That's the big thing, right, is that you can apply 1 or maybe 2 hits of Kraken Slayer, which is a pretty big deal for Alpha Strike. And that's where the math comes in, essentially. Also, it affects Wuju style, keep that in mind, but like, hey, by the way, Wuju style is going to compensate for this change, right? So the Q down, okay, sure. The Q cooldown now scales down with ability haste. So exactly, it's what it says here, right? So nothing I can really add. This is I think a good change. I'm actually a fan of any champion that works this way, having this be the mechanic. You still have real-time human seconds ticking down faster, so you still benefit from building haste with ability like this. That's still useful. And so I'm just glad that's happening because I think it's a good change. Interestingly, Ezreal doesn't have this treatment, and I think he could, but whatever. So Wuju style and Highlander now have the durations extended by casting Q. This is obviously an increase to his snowballing a little bit. And because if you get another Q off, right, because you get a killer assist, you get another Q off, you get a killer assist, you get another Q off, you get a killer assist. What's interesting is Wuju style is actually doing things during Q. Like it's actively applying its buff during that. So I'm actually surprised E's getting extended because, you know, you're not getting the move speed or attack speed during Q. You are using Wuju style during Q. So this almost feels like too much. It doesn't really matter. It's a very, very small bit of power, but feels slightly strange to me. Whatever, it's a very minor thing. And you can, of course, activate Wuju style and such during Q. So once you have launched it with Alpha Strike, hit E, it's going to make your jungle clear faster. As soon as you level 2, suddenly, you know, your, 5 hits of Alpha Strike all deal like 30 bonus damage, and it's a pretty big deal. However, Wuju style is going to nerf very, very slightly to the tune of 0 to 8 less damage per hit. So let's do all of the math. Here is the baseline Q damage, assuming pretty standard AD growth and AD purchases. Yeah, it's not great, right? It's down 20% at basically all points in time. Master EQ deals 20% less damage before Wuju style. However, with Wuju style active, holy moly, is this a lot of damage. What did I do here? Hold on a second. What is going on here? What did I do weirdly? So it does 435, and it does this number. Let me pause and figure out what's going on here. All right, I figured out my mistake. This tab was correct, and I didn't draw it downwards to, like, fill out the rest. So, okay. So, let's go back. So, Alpha Strike's base damage, indeed, is down by 20% with Wuju style on, with a reasonable approximation of how much bonus AD you're going to buy. It is slightly better early game. It is very similar late game. It is all really, really close. In fact, technically, it is lower damage right here. 258 becomes 257. So technically, we have a power trough exactly right here at level 7 with rank 4 of Q before we get another point in E, which is, you know, fraudulent a little bit, but hey, it's accurate. All right, there's that number. In fact, this one, no, it's a buff. Okay, cool. Now, the difficulty here, though, is that the E damage is true damage, which means even in this case, it is definitely more damage in actuality, because the true damage is true damage, and that's very, very good. But also it's worth noting that not every Q will have Wuju style active, right? So non-E Qs are much worse. With E Qs are definitely better in all cases at all points in time. And also, if you buy a Kraken Slayer, it's even better from there. And more of the power budget is in true damage. It's in the E, it's in the Wuju style. So that means lethality is a smaller portion of the overall damage, right? It is 456 with 330 that being physical and the other 120 being the true damage, right? So you're getting, you know, some discount off of that. So yeah, Alpha Strike with E on does a bit more damage, with E off does much less damage, and we also get the benefit of getting to apply Kraken Slayer. Now the math keeps going with things like how the crits work and whatnot, but we're going to move on. Wuju style does a little bit less damage, 0 to 8 less. Here is Master E's average or auto attack damage with E on, again accounting for expected AD upgrades. Yes, indeed, it's only ever down by 8. It's not a very big deal, but you know, this is, you know, kind of going to the math here and whatnot. Seems reasonable, seems okay. Next up, Misfortune. Cool, congratulations. Your W spawns at full move speed, which is good because, I mean, I optimized by I respawn, so hit W and walk out of base. I think spawning with the actually max amount is correct, so good change. Next up is Samira, who has, to my understanding, been an early game skewed champion. She spikes at 6, tries to one-shot you, and, you know, tries to hold on from there. So she's getting a little bit of ult cooldown, which of course can be a frustration lever. If Samira gets a second ulti off, that can be really frustrating. That said, that is her high point, so I can defend her getting her ults off and, you know, letting her get those cool 1v9 situations. Obviously, they need to play around her ban rate, so I understand that matters. Either way, she gets health growth and she gets armor growth as a champion. So here is the math. Here is Samira's base health before and after. This is how much, this is by the way, this percentage is going to be how much magic damage she can take, slash her total health. It's also how much true damage she can take. Okay, she is this much more durable, eventually 5% more. She's actually less shield bound than you might think. As far as I can tell, you should actually rush Collector first item on Samira, full stop. Actually, the Samira tech is just Rush Collector. No ifs, ands, or buts. Spike as soon as possible. Lifesteal is not as important as you think. You're getting Ravenous Hunter, I think, anyway, most times. And at least Conqueror and whatnot. And I think maybe even Legend of Bloodline, I'm not sure, but whatever. The point is, if you actually Rush Collector, you'll have a much, much better time because you will spike and you will kill level 6. Trust me, the real tech is Rush Collector on Samira. You're welcome. So magic durability, true damage durability up 0 to 5%. Physical durability up 1 to 10%. Pretty substantial. This will definitely help her a lot in like allowing her to ult in a late game team fight. This could do definitely quite a bit of heavy lifting. Next up is a reshape to Seraphine. I forgot there's a second big set of changes after Master Yi. There was a Seraphine reshape to push her toward being a support. So actually real quick, as I scroll around, I want to point out that I wrote down the win rates of champions. This was at the midpoint of the patch, is when I built it out in the middle of last week. And this is all ranks on the patch. So Ahri was a bit strong. Gwen was a 47% win rate top laner in all ranks. Kennen was a 47% win rate top laner in all ranks. Master Yi was a 52% win rate. This is all ranks. This is Duskblade versus Kraken Slayer, is my understanding. If I recall correctly, it's a week ago, but it's about right. So he's doing pretty well in both builds. Samira, 48.2% win rate across all ranks across the patch. And then here is Seraphine. So this is mid, AD carry, and support. She is AD carry, bot lane farm, right? She is actually an incredibly good bot laner and probably still will be after the changes. She is a balanced mid laner. She is a weak but very popular support. What's interesting is pick rate wise across all ranks, the popularity goes bot lane, mid lane, support. So even though her best role is bot lane, bot laners don't tend to want to play her. And even though her worst role is support, supports tend to want to play her. So even though she was designed to be a mid lane mage, and in fact is a completely passable mid lane mage or even a bot lane mage, players would rather, despite power, would rather play her as support. And so I think it's totally reasonable that Riot says, screw it, we're going to design her to be a better support so that people aren't trolling when they picked Seraphine's support. So a lot of things are getting reshaped, basically to make W max second correct and make E the last ability that you max. So what is the math? Well, here is the W cost before and after the changes. Obviously, the rank up has been softened, but because you're supposed to max W second now, you are indeed going to do higher mana costs here. But I mean, 50 mana cost is already really cheap. Going to 90 is not the worst thing ever. Okay, how about the cooldown of W? Well, it is going to be in fact worse for a while, but eventually it's okay. And then by level 10, it's going to be better. That's not. I mean, level 10 on support takes a while to get to be fair, but like, I mean, to be fair though, this at this point in time is a nerf to Seraphine, right? I mean, even going to like this, I would say the first 11 levels are a nerf to Seraphine. Like, I think objectively, right, either the cooldown's worse or the cost is worse or almost both. And then even at one point where one finally gets better, it's still a more expensive spell. So, I would say this is not a buff to Seraphine in this part exactly, right? That's not yet a buff. However, they are changing the shield math around. So her self shield is actually going down to the tune of about 20%. This actually affects mid lane Seraphine quite a bit. This is an objective loss to mid lane Seraphine's power. It is also and this is also assuming your max gets second, by the way. If you're leaving it as 1 point wonder, it's even worse for you, but I'm assuming, a change in build. However, the ally shield is pretty substantially better, and for a large portion of the game, right? Because, I mean, right, if we said, hey, by the way, 1 through 11 is where we're nerfing supports, and then, supports kind of end the game at level 11 with this going on, well, 1 through 11 for the ally shield is, like, really, really substantially better, 20 to 35%, and it actually even gets even better up to level 13. So, like, 1 through 13, Seraphine has substantially better ally shielding. Really, really meaningfully stronger ally shielding. So this is a pretty large upgrade in the amount that it's given to. That definitely matters quite a bit. And then finally, we have the missing health ally heal, which is the AP ratio is lower, but the baseline amount is higher based on rank in the ability. Once again, pushing toward lower income support and away from higher income mid and bot, because again, this is a very large buff and arguably compensates for the cost and cooldown change. But here is the Seraphine missing health heal. Once you get points into it, it gets better. So here is the amount that she provides. And honestly, yes, the healing is worse from 1 through 7, but it is better from 8 onwards, which does mean, levels matter, ranks matter. But yeah, that's the overall change there. Seems, relatively doable. Yeah, it's certainly reshaping in that way. Obviously, Riot can adjust after the patch hits to see if it's too strong, too weak, to give more buffs and nerfs as needed, but I think it's a cool set of changes. And then finally, we have Seraphine, because we're going to be maxing E last, despite the fact that E didn't get many changes. Well, the cooldown, of course, is better, so up until very, very later on, we're not going to feel the cooldown change. In fact, it's going to be stronger for a large portion of the game, so this feels like a buff to support Seraphine straight up. And the damage is also identical, 1 through 7. Of course, 8 plus the damage is worse. 8 through 11 is going to be worse, or 8 through 17 is going to be worse. But, this is the make good. I'm like, hey, what happened with the E? Well, she actually has more crowd control. The teammate shielding is better. The cooldown's going to be close, and so on. So, seems pretty reasonable. I think it's a cool set of changes, and I think good job to the designer who did these. Xin Zhao cooldown up 1 second on the E, down 1 second of durability on the R. Pretty big deal there. This is definitely going to push Xin Zhao quite a bit out of the pro meta. I think this is a pretty big change, so this should matter quite a bit. And then Hullbreaker is getting nerfed for ranged champions. Instead of being 20 to 60, it is 10 to 30 for ranged. Now, Hullbreaker kicks in at level 10, or not, like, it's 10 from levels 1 through 9 or 1 through 10. And then it ramps up from there. So here is the math of a Graves buying a Hullbreaker. Here is his armor difference. Here is his MR difference. His overall durability, you know, not down by absurd amounts, but certainly meaningfully so. This will be felt. This will matter. For someone like Mininar, it's going to be felt even more staunchly or more starkly. Mininar has fewer base stats than Graves does. And for, you know, melee champions unchanged. Obviously, when Meganar becomes Meganar, then he's back to being melee and he's full value. So anyway, that's kind of the math on how that all works out. And wonderful stuff. VFX updates to Elise, Mythic content overhaul is happening, and Clash coming up, rank border updates, cool beans. 20 minutes and 17 seconds, we finished the patch rundown. Let's do a quick TLDR, all right. Small early game nerf to Ahri Foxfire damage, just down by 10, and 10 mana up on Charm, 5 mana up on Foxfire. Small nerf, she's a bit strong, so, you know, I think a reasonably sized nerf that she's going to be just fine to a very little bit strong, but reasonable as a champion. Gwen is going to lose a very little bit. By the way, this is like 3 on hit damage on red buff. This is not a very meaningful nerf. This does not instantly kill jungle Gwen. It's not that big of a deal. What it really does is it drops like 30 on hit damage off when hitting Dragon and Baron for anyone, for top or jungle Gwen. So this does a lot to hamper her ability to crush epic objectives, epic monsters in the late game. Skip and slash 50 range should do a lot for her early landing pattern, and maybe will be enough to push her out of pro. Kennen, I think the buff is smaller than it looks on paper. It is 15 flat damage plus a 0.1 AP ratio on his fully stacked W basic attack. I don't think it's a very big deal, but it's going to do a little bit of something. I think Kennen is still going to be an overall slightly weak champion for solo queue, but that's okay. Master Yi is getting a reshape. Basically, the TLDR is Wuju style and Kraken Slayer and other on hit effects now apply during Alpha Strike. TLDR, if you don't have Wuju style on, you do 20% less damage with Alpha Strike. If you do have Wuju style on, you do 10 to 15 or 5 to 15% more damage with Alpha Strike. That's what it comes down to. It also applies to other run hits like Kraken Slayer, which is here. So pushing them towards the crit builds. We'll see how it ends up in the end of the day. Misfortune gets more move speed when she spawns. Great. Samira gets a pretty substantial amount of extra durability. This ends up being 5% more health and 10% more physical durability by level 18. Starts at 0 because level 1 values are untouched. And some better ability to get a second R off during a team fight. Seems pretty cool. Seraphine is being pushed into support. Her lowest win rate, but by far highest pick rate role is support. So Riot's saying, okay, people want to play her here. Let's just make it actually viable and as strong as the other options. So basically, E becomes a 1-point wonder instead of W, and you now max W second. The TLDR is that she has harsher mana costs, and she has longer cooldowns for a larger portion of the game. However, her teammate shielding and teammate healing is higher. Her self-shielding and self-healing is... Well, her self-shielding is lower. Her self-healing is the same as her teammates. So pushed away from mid, pushed a little bit away from earning gold. You can see the AP ratio is a less important part of the power budget of this ability. AP ratio is a less important power budget of this ability, right? Pushed toward shield bumps, pushed toward heal and shield power being valuable, toward support Seraphine builds. Fair enough. Maybe goodbye to the days of very overpowered Landry's Seraphine bot. Very strong champ, though. Used to be anyway. Beat drop, again, 1-point wonder. Xin Zhao, 1 second on the E cooldown, 1 second off the R duration. Definitely going to be pretty meaningful as well. Hullbreaker loses 10 to 30 armor MR for range champs. I want to point out that Hullbreaker scales from level 10 onwards. So if you buy it first item at level 10, it is giving you 10 armor MR, not like 28. Because it hasn't scaled that way. First item Hullbreaker is actually, I would say, arguably nerfed a little bit less. It's the later game Hullbreaker that matters even more. Because, I mean, 10 armor MR matters. To be clear, it does. That's still going to be very meaningful. But losing 30 means more, right? That's all I'm going to say. But pretty big change here. This is definitely going to mean quite a bit. And that's it for the changes. That's it for the actual changes in the game. So thanks for watching, everyone. Love you all very much. See you next time. Bye-bye.